Okay, thank you everyone for joining us tonight. My name is Matt Weibel, Congressman Amash's District Director in the Grand Rapids office. I want to welcome you to tonight's town hall and remind you that we have an office in Grand Rapids and a satellite office in Battle Creek. If you're having issues with the federal agency, whether it's a passport, immigration issue, Social Security, you didn't get a medal, if you're a veteran, we're here to help you expedite that process and do what we can to straighten out the bureaucracy and make sure we can get you a favorable outcome to the best that we can. So you're always welcome to call us. We're here to help, be of assistance. I want to thank Grand Rapids Christian High School for hosting us tonight. This is an incredible facility. So I don't have to tell you this because we're from West Michigan, but let's be respectful of the facility that we're in and make sure we're good guests to the host. I'll turn it over to Rep. Amash, who will give you an update, and then we'll open it up to Q&A.
All right, okay. Have you read any interesting tweets lately? So, I want to say thank you to Grand Rapids Christian. I really do appreciate that they opened their doors for this tonight and gave us the opportunity to have a conversation here in the community about some stuff in the news that I think is really important. And I felt it was important to come back to the district and talk about the things that I've discussed on Twitter and elsewhere. So I really appreciate Grand Rapids Christian for doing that, and I want to give them another round of applause. So thank you, Grand Rapids Christian. So my birthday was on April 18, and I got a birthday present, not a good one. The Muller report came out on my birthday. Which meant I had to spend my birthday thinking about that. But I took my time to read it. I was very careful about it. You know, it was released right before the Easter holiday, so just before Good Friday and Easter holiday. And I'm Orthodox Christian, actually, so our Easter was the next week, so I had a whole other week of Holy Week. So I took my time. I didn't want to rush it. I wanted to read it carefully, read it thoughtfully, and come to the conclusion that would be based on the facts, not based on political affiliation. And it was very evident to me from the beginning that people were rushing to conclusions on both sides of the aisle, to be frank, because you had people making statements about it within hours after it was released. And it's a long report. It's 448 pages. Volume 1, it has more Russians in it than there are characters in Game of Thrones. So it takes a long time to get through that because you have to keep flipping back and forth to figure out who this person is and that person. So it can take a long time, but I focused most of my tweets and most of my comments on Volume 2. And Volume 2 deals with obstruction of justice. And I'll try to keep the intro brief, and we'll have a chance to go back and forth with some questions. But in Volume 2, Robert Muller very clearly identifies and analyzes a number of instances, several instances of obstruction of justice. And he identifies these instances and shows us all the elements. So he presents all of the elements of obstruction of justice. Now, the DOJ, the Department of Justice, has a position that you can't indict a sitting president, and I agree with that position. I don't believe you can criminally indict a sitting president. I think that's what the founders believed. So even though Muller presents all of these elements, he lists them in his findings and analysis, he doesn't come to any assessment because he says, well, we can't indict a sitting president. And he didn't think it would be right to leave an open indictment like that, to leave open charges like that without being able to actually go forward with an indictment, and not give the president then also an opportunity to defend himself through the legal process, because it would just be sitting there during the president's tenure. So he really left it to Congress to come to a determination on these issues. And what I'll say is that in the Constitution, impeachment is a special form of indictment. It is not a criminal indictment. So we're not saying when we proceed with impeachment, if that were to happen, that we're charging the president with criminal counts. It's not about criminality. So even though Mueller's report makes clear that there are elements that meet criminal standards, that's not what impeachment is about. It's a finding that someone has violated the public trust. So the Constitution talks about treason, bribery, and other high crimes and misdemeanors. And when you go back and look at what the framers of the Constitution said, and early American scholars, and even current American scholars, they're pretty consistent on this, that high crimes and misdemeanors refers not to specific statutory crimes. And in fact, when the Constitution was written, there were basically no federal statutory crimes. The federal government wasn't really involved in criminal law. It was primarily state governments and local that would be more involved with criminality. But the Constitution says high crimes and misdemeanors, and our founders meant that as someone who's violating the public trust, someone who's abusing power. They even thought things like maladministration might be impeachable. So someone just not doing their job very well. Now, I'm not sure I would take it that far. I think there are problems with taking it that far, just someone being really bad at their job. But clearly things that violate the public trust are impeachable. Now, when you impeach someone, it doesn't mean that the person is found guilty of what they're being impeached for. It goes to the Senate for a trial. So, for example, President Clinton was impeached, but he was found not guilty of those impeachable offenses in the Senate. Similarly here, you could find impeachment, and then it would go to the Senate, and there's a trial. But I think it's really important that we do our job as a Congress, that we not allow misconduct to go undeterred, that we not just say someone can violate the public trust and that there are no consequences to it. And if you get a chance, I encourage you all to read the tweets where it lays all of this out. Mueller's report lays all of this out. And I'm confident that if you read Volume 2, you will be appalled at much of the conduct. And I was appalled by it. And that's why I stated what I stated. That's why I came to that conclusion, because I think we can't let conduct like that go unchecked. Congress has a duty to keep the president in check, and it is a difficult process. For those who are worried about Congress intruding on the president's powers consistently, it is a difficult process to remove someone from office. It's not easy. So no one's suggesting that just because you start some inquiry or process that a person's removed from office. Nonetheless, we have a job to do. And I think we owe it to the American people to represent them, to ensure that the people we have in office are doing the right thing, are of good character, aren't violating the public trust. And that's why I took the position I did, and I would do it whether it was a Democratic president or a Republican president. It doesn't matter to me. You elected me to represent all of you. I'm not here to represent just one party. I'm here to represent everyone in the district, whether you voted for me or didn't vote for me. And that's the job I will continue to do on your behalf. So I want to thank you. I will now open it up to Q&A, and hopefully we have a fruitful discussion. So thank you so much. We're going to try to figure out how to handle the questions. Let's go, okay, we'll go here. Make it easy. We'll go right up front at first.
Okay, so I read the Mueller report, all 448 pages, and thanks, appreciate it. I agree with your assessment that Trump has crossed the threshold of impeachable conduct, and according to Alexander Hamilton, a founding father, in the Federalist Papers number 65, willfully and knowingly violating the public's trust constitutes an impeachable offense. My question is, in light of the Mueller report's findings, do you support retaliatory tariffs against Russia to send a signal to them that the U.S. will never tolerate such a nefarious act of interference in our elections again?
So if the question's about tariffs, the answer is no. I don't support tariffs. So now, there are other ways to address the issue, and there may be certain types of targeted sanctions that might be in place, but broad sanctions or tariffs, I think, are not good proposals. So those aren't the kinds of things I would support. Yes, we'll try to get a mic to you.
Thank you first for coming and talking to us, representatives. My question is, are you doing anything to help those children who've been separated from their parents at the southern border to get reunited with their family?
That's a good question. So that's an important issue, and we have worked on legislation, which we haven't introduced, but we are drafting legislation and looking at different proposals. I think that, and we all know that our immigration system is really messed up right now. There is obviously a crisis of sorts at the border with people coming in, many families coming in, and people being separated, and we don't want to see people separated at the border. We don't have enough resources down there, and I think there's been way too much focus on just the wall. And I've said before, I have no problem with enhancing fencing and security at the border. I don't have a problem with that. I don't think you should need to have a wall going all the way across or anything like that. But there are certainly areas where you can improve the border security. But just as important, if not more important, is that we have a better way to process people who are arriving, because there are many people who are seeking asylum, and not all of them are truly seeking asylum. Some of them may be pretending to seek asylum. They're coming here for other purposes. But we do have to have people there to assess that, and right now we don't have enough resources. And I think the president made a mistake when he said many times that he doesn't want to support more judges and more people to assess the claims at the border. He just wants to close it off and be, you know, super tough on everyone. I think that's not the correct approach. Let's see. All right, we'll go to this gentleman here in the suit. If we can get it to him.
First, I wanted to say a comment, and then I got a question. First, I want to salute your courage
And that's,
Thank you. Thanks.
And that's coming from 50 years ago today, me and 6 other comrades were blown up in Vietnam and one was killed. 50 years ago today.
Very sorry. Thank you for your service.
Now my question,
Thank you.
my question, is there anything in the Constitution, or can we amend it, where the electorate gets a mulligan?
So, so no, I don't know if that's a serious question. We don't get a mulligan. We get to vote every 4 years for president, and we make a decision about who we want for president. And obviously, there are other checks under our Constitution, like we talked about the impeachment process, where Congress can assert itself and make a determination about whether someone is violating the public trust. But really, in almost all cases, this should be left to the political process. And I think that those powers should be left to extraordinary circumstances. Let's see. Yeah, I can't. Yeah, we'll go to that woman in the black. Yes? Yep. We'll get a mic to you.
I was wondering if you'd be willing to share your thoughts on medical freedom and bodily autonomy, specifically referring to the recent bill proposals regarding mandatory vaccines for all children regardless of medical history, as well as the medical tracking of such.
So I don't know that I'm familiar with the specific item you're talking about, but I think that any mandates like that should not be done at the federal level. So I would keep the federal government out of it. I do think that...
They both are federal.
I do think, okay, so I don't support federal mandates of that sort. I do think that states have a responsibility to make those determinations, and also places like schools have to make assessments about whether they allow students in who are vaccinated or not vaccinated, because they have to have concern about the other students who might be harmed if there are students there who are not vaccinated. We will, okay, we'll go up here. Sorry, Matt. I can see more easily over here. Maybe we have, I don't know if we have another microphone or not. Yeah? Right here.
Hi, thank you.
Thanks.
I appreciate your courage, and I'm wondering what the next steps would be to ask for an impeachment inquiry. I've been calling Pelosi almost every day because we need to change her mind. You've got Barr and a couple other people that are ignoring subpoenas, which is totally unacceptable. And if an impeachment inquiry were to happen, they couldn't ignore those subpoenas. Otherwise, I'm sure that something bad would happen to them. So what's our next steps?
Well, thanks for the question. I do think it's appropriate for the speaker to proceed with an inquiry, to proceed with hearings and other things. I think she is, well, the speaker's really in charge of the House, and the speaker will make that determination. So no matter what any individual member of Congress wants to do, if the speaker's not on board, the thing is not happening. And that's true under Paul Ryan, and it's true under Nancy Pelosi. So I think it would be appropriate for her to proceed with that. I think she's very nervous about some of her Democrats who are in what she considers tougher districts, and I think she's trying to maintain the majority, so she's sort of playing it both ways. But I don't think that's what we should do under our Constitution. We have a responsibility to uphold the law, to prevent government abuse, and I think it's wrong for members of Congress to spend all their time, especially the leadership, taking into account these political considerations about whether it will hurt a member in his or her district. That's what's wrong with our system right now. That's why we have so much discord, is because members of Congress are just following the party line all of the time. And we need to not have leadership just protecting each of the members, making sure that they don't take any risky votes or tough votes. Let's have votes out there. Just to show you how much people toe the party line. The typical member of Congress votes with his or her party about 95 to 99% of the time, which is astonishing. I got kicked off of the Budget Committee after my first term in Congress because I voted with my party only 95% of the time in the Budget Committee. They actually told me that wasn't enough. So that shows you how much they demand loyalty, and both parties do this. I currently vote with my party maybe about 70 to 75% of the time, which is a high percentage. I think most people would consider that a fairly high percentage, yet in the world of Congress, that's considered like you're banished from our party. They don't want you there because you're voting with the party 70 to 75% of the time. And that's not a healthy system. That's not a healthy environment. That's not how it used to work. And I think we really need to address that. And it really comes down to our leadership, whether it's Republican leadership or Democratic leadership. They're doing the wrong thing consistently. They're demanding this kind of loyalty. And if you have a system like that, you're never going to get honest representation. You're going to continue to get the kind of representation we have right now in Congress, where most members of Congress just stick with their party consistently. So, what can we do about it? Okay, so let me just answer this. What can we do about it? You need to be more concerned about the process in Congress. It's never talked about. It's the most important thing that's never talked about. The process makes all the difference. And right now, you have a system where the Speaker of the House controls the entire process. That was true under Republicans, and it's true under Democrats. Under Paul Ryan, for example, we had, for the first time in Congress's history, an entire term where we weren't allowed to amend any legislation on the House floor. So for those of you who say things like, Justin, can you offer some amendments to make this change or that change? No amendments were allowed the entire Congress. And so far, under Speaker Pelosi, the same thing is happening. No amendments have been allowed on the House floor. Things are brought up under what's called a closed rule or a structured rule. Closed rule means no amendments at all. Structured rule means you can offer amendments not on the House floor. You have to send them to a committee called the Rules Committee. So you submit those amendments, and then the Speaker of the House decides whether to allow those amendments to be voted on. And the Speaker of the House will not allow your amendment to be voted on if it has a chance of passing and does anything. So the only amendments that will get a vote are the ones that have no chance of passing. The Speaker thinks they don't really have any shot. Nobody's going to support this one. Or amendments that don't do anything. So an amendment that's just a messaging amendment. Those will get a vote on the House floor. The Speaker will say, yeah, send it to the Rules Committee, bring it to the floor. But for us to be able to offer an amendment on the House floor, that can't be done. Now, the House doesn't normally work this way. At the beginning of each term, we adopt something called the Rules of the House, the Rules Package. And these rules go back to the time of our founding, basically. You go back to the beginning of Congress. And each year they get, or every 2 years they get readopted and they get amended a little bit. And the rules are actually pretty open. In other words, they give individual members of Congress a lot of power. But every single week since I've been there, every single week, we have waived or suspended the rules. So we have never followed the rules of the House of Representatives. It has never happened at any time I've been there. Now, you might ask, why do members of Congress waive or suspend the rules? Because we have to vote on that to waive them or suspend them. Because the members of Congress are told, if you don't do it, you will get kicked off your committees, you won't get chairmanship. If you have a campaign, we won't support you, and we might actually fund one of your opponents. So every single week, members of the majority, whether it's the Republican majority under Paul Ryan or the Democratic majority under Nancy Pelosi, every single week, the members of the majority vote to violate the rules of the House, to say the rules of the House will not be followed every single week. And when you think about it, it's obvious why that happens. The speaker has so much control. It's like a never-ending cycle, right? The speaker has so much power, and because she or he has so much power, it creates more power. The speaker can raise more money than all the members of Congress in that party combined. So the speaker has a tremendous amount of influence, and it can control the whole process. So if you go against the Speaker of the House, and you're in the majority party, you're toast. And that's why people don't do it, and that's why we keep going through this cycle. And until people at home understand that and start caring about that, things will not change. Instead, what ends up happening, because we get so fixated on the particular outcomes of the week, the particular substance, everyone on social media complains about the particular issue at hand, and they don't think at all about the process and how we're producing legislation or not producing legislation. And if we focus more on the process, we could actually resolve these issues. You need the House to be a deliberative body where everyone participates and everyone has a chance to offer their amendments, to offer their ideas. And if you do that, I promise you, people will be less partisan, it'll be more open. You will have better outcomes for the American people. So, we'll go to that gentleman. We'll try to get a mic to you.
Hello. All right. Again, Justin, I want to thank you for coming out today. I really appreciate it. So I'm going to talk about infrastructure. And so my question is, with bipartisan support for increased infrastructure spending at both the state and federal level, will you ensure that such spending includes extensive provisions for public transportation and reduces subsidies for suburban sprawl through highway construction, which not only destroys agricultural and natural areas, but it also forces people into automobile dependency? Thank you.
Thanks. So you're saying, before you take the mic away, you're saying reducing subsidies? If the question is reducing subsidies, the answer is yes, I want to reduce subsidies.
Okay, fantastic.
Okay, so I would reduce subsidies. I don't think that every infrastructure project is the responsibility of the federal government. A lot of infrastructure, particularly when it's located exclusively within a state, is the state government's responsibility, and it shouldn't be handled by the federal government. That's not what the federal government is there for. So, I think we've lost sight of federalism as a principle, and one of the reasons I think we argue so much is because we have the federal government doing too many things, and we should have a greater division of powers. That's the way the system was created. I mean, when you go back to the framers, they created a system where powers are divided among the many states, and the federal government handles things that are very much in common. For example, national defense would be something that is common to all the states. It doesn't matter whether your state has 20 people or 20 million people, you have to have national defense protecting it from foreign attacks and other things. But other things, other items can be handled, not all other items, but many other items can be handled at the state level, and that would be a better system where I think we would have a greater degree of happiness. We wouldn't be always fighting each other. I'll go over here to the Make America Great Again. Yeah, no problem. So let's be respectful.
That's so typical that you boo me because I have a Made America Great hat on again. Really. It's
Let's all be
typical.
respectful, please.
Yes. So anyway, first of all, I've been your supporter since you started running for Congress, and I can't even tell you how disappointed I am. I mean, you talk about, I'll go to my notes. You talk about the Constitution, how important that is, but yet nothing that Muller came out with in his report, nothing that has been said about him and President Trump and it is constitutional, and it's been a smear attack because that's how the Democrats work. If nobody will go along with what they say, or a person doesn't go along with what they say, that person is attacked and destroyed personally. And the facts are never involved because, goodness, don't confuse the issue with facts. But going back to the Constitution, I don't see where, and it seems like there's more supporters for you here than Trump supporters, and that but I'm not sure that that's the same all over the country, and I would beg to difference that there's more supporters that agree with you than President Trump. And so violating the public trust is such a vague term where there's hundreds of millions of Americans, and who are you polling to get that, and what kind of questions? But
yeah.
Can I just finish also very quickly? So if you want to go along with violating the public trust, how far does that go? Are we going to look at the Democrats that have done the same thing? And, oh, please, really.
So let's all be respectful. Please.
See, this is my point exactly. You don't, yeah. Because they have all, starting with Hillary Clinton on down, have tried to take over the country by a silent coup. And it's really...
Please, I ask you all to please be respectful of the person asking the question. So.
Yeah, and this is what Muller and the Democrats have all tried to, and the deep state, the bureaucrats. I don't know if you've ever dealt with a bureaucrat, but it's just mind-boggling that we have to deal with them. I have a lot of experience. And so that...
okay. Please be respectful. Please be respectful. Please.
My point of view has...
Please be respectful. Sir, please calm down.
Okay, my question is...
Yes.
Thank you. I'm just trying to get my point across because nobody else has asked a question. Anyway, my question is, how come you've become a Democrat when we voted for you as a Republican? Because you've just drank the same Kool-Aid as all the Democrats.
Okay, so let's keep the mic there because I might have some follow-up I want to ask. But first, I have one of the most constitutionally conservative and fiscally conservative voting records in the whole Congress. And in fact, I have voted to spend less than any member of Congress in either chamber since I've been in Congress. So I voted for less spending. When I got elected as part of the Tea Party movement, people cared about limited government. They cared about fiscal conservatism, making sure that our government wasn't spending too much. Under the current administration, spending is skyrocketing. So spending has gone way up. And Republicans, unfortunately, haven't said that much about it. And I've continued to vote to reduce spending at the federal level. I talked earlier about how I think we do too many things at the federal level. If you look at my scorecards from conservative groups, I'm at the top of like nearly all the scorecards. So you're not going to find me, I'm not like even a middle-of-the-road Republican when it comes to these scorecards. I'm at the top or near the top of every scorecard. So I haven't changed. I'm who I said I was. I'm a principled, constitutional conservative who has stayed consistent regardless of whether we have President Obama in office or President Trump. Now, I heard your comments about the Mueller report, but you haven't stated any facts. What are the facts you're disputing? I tweeted about 70 times over a course of 4 threads, and I have yet to see anyone really refute the points that I make in the threads. So what are the specific points you'd like to refute? I'd be happy to hear. Please be respectful. I think this is important.
The whole Mueller report was based, even before the investigation started, was based on a lie.
I would ask you all to please be respectful so we can hear the question.
It was all based on a lie to begin with, because everything that we're finding out now about the Russians, he never met the Russians, he never colluded with them. That was Hillary Clinton. The Steele dossier was a whole made-up lie. And all the people that were indicted and put in jail by Mueller and his minions the only thing they did was sit in FBI interrogation for hours on end for many, many days. And by that time, you're tired, and so maybe you get your words twisted, and then they get accused of being a perjurer. And that's just, and
so
then
can I ask, is it your position that the entire Russia investigation is fraudulent? The entire thing?
I do. The whole thing. The entire thing, and Mueller.
Even though there's no evidence that the entire thing is based on the things you're saying, like the Steele dossier and other, there's no evidence that the entire investigation is based on those things.
Because Mueller didn't want to come out with anything. He was just giving, because he never said that President Trump had committed a crime because President Trump didn't. And you can't have obstruction of justice if there's no crime committed.
That's not true.
Yes, it is.
No,
yes,
it's not true.
Okay, well, I don't want to,
okay,
but
it's
not true.
But this is important because, I think you hear that stuff on social media, or you might be told that stuff in certain
excuse
outlets.
me, I can think for myself. I don't go on social media to give my facts.
It is just not legally true that you can't obstruct justice when there's no underlying crime.
How can you obstruct justice when there's no crime to begin with?
It's very easy to explain. The reason someone may not charge an underlying crime is because justice was obstructed. So, for example, you might have a situation where someone obstructs justice and therefore evidence is destroyed or prevented from getting to the prosecutor. So the underlying crime then cannot be charged.
There was no evidence.
That would be a situation, for example, where you can't charge the underlying crime, but there was certainly obstruction of justice. In fact, obstruction of justice is more relevant when there's not the underlying crime, because that's when it would come into play. It would come into play most when you don't have the underlying crime, because the obstruction is to prevent the charging of the underlying crime.
Okay, there was no crime because it was all based on a lie made up by the Democrats who didn't like the fact that Hillary Clinton lost and President Trump won. And also the deep state and the Republicans hated him too. They did, and it's ridiculous because Trump is all for limited government.
Please be respectful, please.
President Trump is all for limited government just like you said, because the federal
right.
government can't do
Hold on.
things.
President Trump is not all for limited government. No,
Well-
that's just not true. That's not true at all.
Okay,
The
more
government,
than, you know what? I can't debate you on that
All right.
because I haven't researched that. However, he wants to get rid of the Department of Education.
okay,
And,
well,
and-
he's free to do so.
okay, you know what, really?
He's free to do so.
Really?
He's the president. He could make a move to do so.
Okay. All right, we'll just move on, yeah, because this is not going anywhere.
Okay. All right. All right. Where are we looking at? These young people over here. One of them. I don't know. You're all young. I don't. You're young too. Go ahead. Go ahead. Then I'll go. Go ahead. You're kind of cutting, but yes.
The reason why I came here today, I listened to your commercial in the newscast. My name is Larry Donnell Jones. I'm a former Michigan Department of Corrections correction officer. I worked in Jackson for 5 years. Prior to being wrongfully convicted myself and being falsely put in prison on the charge she just got done talking about, obstruction of justice. Judge Cosler was the judge at the time. I went to federal court, established I didn't do the crime. Former federal district judge Doug W. Hill found prejudice for me on December 16, 1991. I went back to the magistrate, Timothy P. Greeley, under ineffective counsel. He didn't body slam me on first prong. My thing is this: if they put me in prison for 30 to 50 years on the words, "I'm Larry Jones," with no other evidence, nothing at all, just put in prison for that. And then they turn around and they're doing this investigation on Trump on obstruction of justice. You just told her that there's, without an underlying crime, that you can't be charged with obstruction of justice. Yes, you can. I'm living proof of it. I did 33 years as a result of that on my name and no other evidence. So that's incorrect. So that Muller report, that Muller put out, they said that there's no underlying crime. Now they're investigating for it, but but you can't be put in prison where there's no underlying crime because I'm living proof of it.
Yeah, I agree with you on that point.
And so then when you talk about that they need to change the criminal justice and change the reform criminal justice. Criminal justice reform start with the police, prosecutors, and judges. If they corrupt, then it don't make no difference what you do in the criminal justice part.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you on that. So
my thing is this: when you told her that there can't be a charge of obstruction of justice.
No, I said there can be a charge of obstruction of justice without an underlying crime.
Right, because that's what they do to me right now. And like I said, they just admitted it in with no evidence.
Yeah. So I can't speak to your case because I don't know your situation.
It's people versus Larry Donnell Jones in Muskegon County in front of Judge Timothy G. Hicks. Case number 85-26846 FH. All you gotta do is go look at it. The file is there.
We got it.
I'm gonna take you up on something because I will be in Washington D.C. within the next 2 weeks, lobbying the congressmen because the reason why they won't, although Hicks found my newly discovered evidence credible and true, he would not vacate my conviction to keep me from being paid for the illegal 33 years I spent in prison. So I'm gonna take you up there and I'm gonna see you in Washington when y'all return.
Okay, sounds good.
Got you. Remember my name, Larry Donnell Jones.
Got it. All right. So I'm first of all, I'm a big supporter of criminal justice reform. I do think that our justice system is unfair in many ways, and it is particularly unfair to people who don't have power, who are not the president of the United States, not people who have great lawyers, So I'm very concerned about that, and I'll definitely look into that.
Okay, but you got that? You got my case number?
Oh, I'm sure we got it. It's
Okay.
on camera.
Okay.
Everyone in the world's got
Appreciate
it now.
you. Thank you.
Everyone's going to be reading this case.
Okay, so we have a comment and a question. So our comment first is that we want to thank you and our AP government teacher, Mr. Kotz, for teaching us how to think critically rather than emotionally.
Thank you.
Our question is, although it's found in the Mueller report that Trump has made impeachable offenses, we want to know, because the impeachment process can take so long, that because of the 2020 election, if impeachment process is worth the time that it takes, because the election's coming up and it's such a lengthy process.
Yeah, so this is a great question. And it's something that everyone has to wrestle with. You know, I wrestled with this issue quite a bit because to me the conduct was obviously impeachable. So then the question is, do you then move forward with impeachment proceedings? And my biggest concern, I thought about this for a long time. Like I said, I spent a month reviewing, analyzing, thinking about it. And I am concerned that we've gotten to the point where impeachment may never be used in any circumstance. And I think that is a greater risk than the risk that it will be used too often. When you have impeachable conduct, there are so many layers that that need to be moved through before you would actually remove someone from office. So I think there are a lot of protections for someone like the president. You'd have to have a 2/3 majority in the Senate to convict someone, which is a very high threshold to get to, especially in a very partisan environment. But I do think that it is more dangerous for our country to allow a president to mislead people, make things up. For example, in the Mueller report, again, I think that a lot of my colleagues haven't read it. A lot of people at home haven't read it, and I understand why that is, because you expect your representatives and senators to read it and understand it. But and as an example, in the Mueller report, he asked the White House counsel to create a false record. Things like that to basically mislead people about a statement he had made. Things like that, to me, reflect incredible dishonesty and really harm the office of the presidency. And I don't think that you can just let that stuff go and say, hey, it's no big deal, we're going to have an election in 2 years, and just let it go. I think you have to have proceedings to deter this kind of conduct, even if ultimately the person is not convicted. And Bill Clinton's an example of this again, where he was impeached, and we could debate that one, you know, all night too. He was impeached, but he was not convicted in the Senate. So, you know, there are a lot of protections here for a president. But we should expect the president to uphold the law, to have the highest standard more than anyone else. More than anyone in our government, we need the president to be ethical, to be of high moral character, and to do the right thing. And the pattern you find in the Mueller report is of someone who does not meet that standard.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yep. Go ahead.
I just want to applaud your courage. Again, as a retired educator, a parent, a grandparent, someone who's taught in Sunday schools, I don't know how we tell our children not to lie, that it's wrong to lie, when it's evident throughout the highest levels of government. I don't know how we teach children not to bully on the playground when bullying comments are constantly coming out in the media. These are the kinds of things that, though I don't agree with many of your stands, I applaud your courage and your morality that seems to be lacking throughout our entire congressional office, our executive office, throughout it all. So thank you for giving us something to refer to.
Thank you. And I do think that this kind of stuff, ethics in government, is critically important. I couldn't go home to my kids and tell them I did the right thing if I didn't stand up for what was right. All of our kids are watching. They expect they expect our leaders to be ethical. We should expect our leaders to be ethical and to have high moral character. And I think we're sending the wrong message to many children. We're sending the wrong message to people throughout the country when we don't live up to that, when we don't stand up for that. And I can tell you as a person who's from an immigrant family, my parents are immigrants, you see countries around the world where people do not respect the rule of law and they don't care about the character of their leaders. They don't care about the ethics of their leaders. And in these countries, all that matters is that your person is in power, and as long as your person's in power, that person's allowed to do whatever they want. And the good news is Americans aren't like that. We do still in this country believe in ethics, in character, and we want our leaders to represent all the people and not bully people, not fight for only one segment of the population. We need people who are going to represent the whole country, every single person, even people who they don't agree with. And I think that's what we need to have in office. I'll go to you, sir.
It was the orange shirt, right?
Yeah, you're easy to spot.
I just want to say publicly that I just appreciate something that your office did for me personally and our family. I came to one of these before, and what Matt said, I contacted your office and requested the medals that my father had earned in World War II. And I appreciate the facilitation that they provided, and we ended up getting the medals. So I was very
Thank you.
cool.
Thank you for sharing that.
I encourage you all to do the same because they were definitely earned and deserved. I hear these words, if I could, I hear these words morality and ethics and accountability, maybe not accountability, but you know what I mean. What's interesting, you talked about the process in Congress. Isn't that also an abuse of power by the Speaker of the House? I mean, you said, and to use your words, your word, if we don't vote the party lines, I hope I got this right, you're toast. Isn't that an abuse of power? Do you think that's what our forefathers wanted?
Yeah. You're absolutely right. That is an abuse of power, and it's the abuse of power that is not talked about enough. And I have spoken out against it many times, and I spoke out against it when the Republicans had the leadership. So when there was a Republican speaker, I spoke out against it, and I'll speak out against it when Nancy Pelosi is speaker. It is not right for our congressional leaders to control it top down, to bribe members of Congress, basically tell them you will get this or that if you stick with the team. You saw what happened to me from our so-called leader, Kevin McCarthy. I read the Mueller report. I'm sure he did not read it. I stated what it actually says, and he just resorted to ad hominem attacks and other various attacks that have nothing to do with the Mueller report. This is the kind of leadership, in quotes, that we now have in Congress. And the idea behind what they were doing was they want to intimidate and scare other members of Congress. They don't want other Republicans, and similarly, the Democrats will do the same thing. Nancy Pelosi will do the same thing to her people. They don't want people speaking out against the party line ever. If you speak out against the party line, they are coming after you. Oh, sure, they'll give you a little bit of leeway here and there if you don't make too much noise about it. But if you take any big position against what the leaders of your party want, then they are coming after you and they will make an example of you. And that is the biggest abuse of power right now happening in our government that needs to be addressed, because if you wonder why the president, the executive, has so much power, whether it was Barack Obama or Donald Trump or any other executive, why they have so much power, it's because Congress is incompetent, Congress is impotent, they don't do their job. Congress says to the president, Mr. President, the only people you have to deal with are a few of us, just the leaders in Congress. If you deal with us, we'll take care of things and we can all work it out. Imagine if Congress were a deliberative body where every member of Congress had a say. where we all voted, and we voted according to our minds and according to representation for our district. If we all went to Congress and did that and upheld the Constitution, then when leaders took a proposal to the president and said, this is what we passed out of our chamber or passed out of both chambers, the president couldn't just say to the leaders, could you change this or could you change that or I want this or that. Because the leaders in Congress would say, Mr. President, I know you want this or that thing, but I have to take it back to the whole body, and we're going to have a whole nother debate, and people will be allowed to amend your proposal. It's a deliberative process, and we're going to discover the outcome, and then you can decide whether to sign it or not. But right now, under our current system, the president only has to work with a few people. All he has to do is work it out with a few people, and he gets his way. He has a lot more leverage than he does if he has to work with an entire deliberative body. And this is a huge problem that I'm asking all of you to pay attention to. Nobody talks about it. Nobody cares about it. It's not talked about on TV. You won't see it on Fox News or CNN or MSNBC. You won't see it in the blogs. But it is the biggest problem we face, and all of the other problems stem from that. If you're worried about President Trump is just a symptom of this problem. And you need to address this problem, and it's on you to make sure that you send members of Congress who are going to uphold the system, who are going to ensure that there's a deliberative process, who aren't just going to be cowed by their own party and do whatever the party wants. Yeah, this young man. I'll go to this young man. Do you want the mic or you want to just... Maybe behind you can't hear you.
So there have been a few rumors since you started tweeting about impeachment, and I'm not accusing you, but I'm just giving you a chance to respond to this, that this is sort of a ploy to position, not a ploy, but you're trying to position yourself more in the public eye nationally, possibly eyeing a run maybe as a libertarian in 2020. Have you completely ruled that out?
No, I've said many times I don't rule things like that out. And I haven't ruled out running for governor or Senate or state house or any other position like that, except state attorney general. I'm not interested in that one. But no, if I were trying to roll out something like that, this is not how I would do it. There are plenty of policy differences that I could debate the president on. He's spending like crazy. I think that he's harming our standing in the world in so many respects. But there are so many ways I could debate the president on policy issues, and I don't think that impeachment is the way to roll out some kind of announcement. But again, I don't rule things out. I think that in life, if you're fighting to defend the Constitution and you find a way to do it that's different and maybe more effective, then you have to think about that. I think I've done a good job in Congress bringing attention to a lot of issues that people are not talking about. And for those of you who have been to my town halls, it's not like any of this is new. I mean, you already knew that I was independent. You already knew that I was going to stand up for the Constitution and do what I thought was right, regardless of the political consequences. That's something I've been doing the whole time I've been in Congress, and that's not going to change. We'll go to you. Gentleman with the beard. No, with the beard right here, yep.
Hi.
Hi.
I have, it's a simple question. I'm a law-abiding citizen of the United States of America and the state of Michigan. I've never committed a criminal act or have any criminal history. However, I'm unable to purchase a weapon in any state. There are many like me, Colorado, Massachusetts. Anybody who has ever used weed is unable to purchase a firearm under law. What do you plan to do to fix state and federal discrepancies?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'm for legalizing marijuana at the federal level. I don't think that you should have a federal government getting involved in something where you have states with widely divergent views on this. You have the state of Michigan that has had its say, and we don't want it criminalized in the state of Michigan. And I think it's a problem if you have the federal government saying one thing, the state of Michigan saying something else, the city of Grand Rapids saying something else, and then whichever law enforcement official shows up at your door, you're in trouble or you're not in trouble. So I think that you should take care of it at the federal level, and my friend Thomas Massey, I think, is working on that particular issue, and I'd be supportive of his efforts on that issue as well. I don't know if he's introduced legislation or not, but I am supportive. I am supportive of his efforts on that. I'm sorry. What? Yeah, I'm sure it's not, but I'll call on you because it's probably not easy. Go ahead.
I'm like everybody else. I applaud your courage. It's got to, do you play baseball? Because you've been fielding really well.
I don't. You know. I don't play baseball. I'm sorry.
Okay, well, I'm impressed. I didn't know what to expect, but I'm impressed. So I had a question, but you've sort of answered it in pieces. You talked about Kevin McCarthy. Andy Biggs also mentioned you in the press and says, hey, I don't know what you're doing. Aside from that, let's go somewhere else. Just give you a chance. I'd like you to defend your position on your stance that you're okay allowing illegal immigrants to vote.
Yeah. So I'm not.
Really? Well, then you can educate us on why you're not.
Yeah.
That'd be great.
Okay, so I think what you're referring to is some, I think it was like maybe a motion to recommit or something that was in Congress. And the motion attempted to emphasize the point that anyone who is not a citizen who is voting in any jurisdiction in the country, that is a bad thing. That's what the motion tried to suggest. But actually, that's not how our system of government works. That is not what our Constitution says, and that's not how our framers designed our system. And in fact, in states throughout the country, you've had people who are non-citizens voting since the time of our founding. That is something that the states decide and local jurisdictions decide. So at the federal level, yes, we absolutely do have a requirement that you have to be a citizen to vote in a federal election. And I fully support that, 100%. And I even support requiring citizenship in state elections. But there may be situations where you have some local election and you have residents, non-citizens but residents who are voting. They send their kids to the school or something like that. And it's just related to like a school board election. Well, that should be up to the local jurisdiction. That shouldn't be up to the federal government. And to think that the federal government should decide that actually goes against our constitutional system. It goes against our constitutional structure. So I can't support something like that because that defies the way our system was designed. So our system was designed to allow states to make those decisions. And in fact, the current law is that states and local jurisdictions make those determinations, not the federal government. That is the law, and that's our Constitution. So if people don't like that aspect of the Constitution, then you have to amend the Constitution. But that's the way our system works, and I think that it has its positives to it. Yep. I don't know, what has he got in his hand? Oh, okay. I'll go to the. He had it covered. So. Okay, hold on. I'm going to the gentleman back there.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Congressman, for coming tonight. Appreciate it. Over the past 10 years, you've frequently disagreed with the Republican leadership, and now you've called for the impeachment of a Republican president. You're the only Republican in Congress to do so. You've made it clear tonight that party loyalty is not a real high priority for you. And so my question is, why don't you just be honest and declare yourself as an independent and run as an independent?
So that is a good question. The the system we have in Michigan makes it very difficult to run as an independent. One of the things we have, for example, is higher ballot access requirements if you run as an independent. So you have to collect more signatures. It's much more difficult to get on the ballot. But then you face what I think is the biggest hurdle, which is straight ticket voting. And as much as straight ticket voting is often talked about, I think particularly by Democrats, as something that is a positive and is helpful to people so that we don't have long lines, et cetera, et cetera. I think it's largely something that both party establishments really like because it prevents alternative choices from appearing on the ballot and winning. If you have straight ticket voting, what ends up happening is the people at the top of the ticket, the parties listed at the top of the ticket, get a whole bunch of votes. So maybe 50, 60% of the people just vote straight ticket and then they get out of there. So if you are an independent on some other part of the ballot, they don't even see you. They don't even get to that choice. And I think that makes it very difficult. And in fact, only a few states have straight ticket voting. Michigan's one of them. And I would suspect if someone studied it, and I hope someone will study it if they're listening to this, that Michigan and other states like Michigan have way fewer independent candidates and third-party candidates even who are elected to higher office because of straight ticket voting. Now, for those who are concerned about straight ticket voting, they say, well, we don't want to make lines too long, et cetera. What I would say is there are alternatives that allow you to avoid straight ticket voting. You can have more polling places. You can have places open for longer periods of time. You could have voting over a longer period of time. So there are other things to address those issues. There are other ways to address those issues without straight ticket voting. So straight ticket voting, also think about straight ticket voting this way. If you want to vote straight ticket, that means it's actually not that difficult for you to vote the whole thing, because how hard is it to go pick all the Republicans or all the Democrats? That's actually quite easy. The people who take a long time voting are the people who go back and forth. The people who all pick one party, you just go pick the party. Maybe it takes you like a few seconds longer than straight ticket voting, but it's not that much of a difference. So, so I would say we have to get rid of straight ticket voting in this state, and then you'd open it up to alternative choices. Yeah, I'll go right here. We can get you the microphone if you want.
I've also read the Mueller report, and all of it, and you're not wrong. But my question is, and I think we need a chart for the Russians. I mean, I couldn't, it's crazy.
There's a glossary.
Yeah, there is,
Yeah.
and I went through it, but you need like I guess it's the teacher in me, we need a visual diagram to keep them straight. It's been confirmed, whether you support impeachment or don't, that the Russians were involved in our last election. So the question is, what are we going to do about it so they're not the next time?
Yeah, so that's a good question. And that's going to require heightened security, heightened efforts by the executive branch. It's going to require the president to step up and care about it.
But is there action that Congress can take that we could, as citizens, ask Congress to take by calling, writing,
I think most
emailing?
of this, the reason Congress has some role, but we actually benefit from a very decentralized election system.
Yes.
So I wouldn't want Congress to centralize things and make it more top-down or run by the federal government. I think it's good that we have our elections handled very locally and separated and not all interconnected. I think that actually is a buffer against these kinds of threats.
But it's not
mostly the way to address it is to have a president who cares about the intelligence information that comes in.
But we
So
don't.
when you have intelligence information that comes in that leads you to believe there are concerns, then you address those concerns.
But we don't. So what's the check back? What's the alternative? What's the balance of power?
The check, again, is for Congress to continue to press on it, for members of the Republican Party, my party, to press the president on it, and we don't have enough of that. But if you're talking about some kind of legislative check, I'm not sure there's a whole lot of legislation that could be passed to address the problem.
Okay.
So. Yeah, thanks. Okay, I'll go to that gentleman. Yeah, I'll go to you and then you. That's fine.
All right. Justin, you seem willing to fall on your sword to do what you believe is right. But if you take that too far, you don't get reelected. Are you concerned, especially with what's going on with the impeachment talks, that you might not get reelected, and then we miss out on a principled representative?
Thanks. This is a good question. And the answer is no, I am not concerned about it. And I can tell you why I'm not concerned about it. Because my colleagues for 8 years that I've been in Congress have been telling me, Justin, if you do this thing or that thing, you'll get voted out. If you do this thing or that thing, you're in big trouble. And I've discovered over time that one of the big differences between me and them is that I believe in the people I represent. So it's not just that people believe in me, but I believe in the people I represent. And I believe the people are smart enough to figure out what's going on. I really believe that. And in this district, I heard someone mention running as a Republican on Trump's coattails or something. The president did much worse than I did in this district, okay? In fact, we've looked up the numbers. President Trump had the worst showing in Kent County of any Republican in the history of our county, and the worst showing in the city of Grand Rapids of any Republican in our city. So the president did not do well here. I did significantly better than he did. And in fact, in the prior election, in 2018 and in 2016, I outperformed all of the Republicans in the district and across the state. So I'm not worried about it. I really do believe in people. I think they can tell the difference, and so it doesn't concern me. And in any case, you should always do what's right. I don't think you should compromise your principles and your values to stay in power, because that's what people do time and again. They compromise themselves, and then what are they even there for? They claim to come to Congress to uphold some principles, and they don't even have any principles anymore. And it's often gradual. Like I've seen it with my colleagues so many times. Oh, I just won't be principled on this one. And then, oh, how about this one too? And then another one. And then a year later, they're like a zombie. You know, they don't have any principles at all. They just follow the leader. So whatever McCarthy says, or Ryan, or Pelosi, that's what they do. And that's not what I want to be. I never wanted to be that. I don't care for that. And I couldn't look my kids in the eye and say that I was a responsible person if I did that kind of thing. I'm going to go to this gentleman here.
All right, this is going to be a real easy one. I have a dream of being booed by everybody in a crowd this size. So let me just confess. 2-time Obama voter, 1-time Trump voter. All right, all politics aside, I'm 50 years into this, and I've heard so much from both parties that I'm just exhausted by it, and I don't believe any of it anymore. It's all hot air. So let me ask a business question instead. Is it true that you've got a factory and you make tools somewhere?
This is a great question. The answer is no. I do not have a factory. You hear these like ridiculous stories. I do not have a factory in China. I own part of our family's business here in Michigan, so it's in Wyoming.
I was going to ask you if maybe you wanted to move it to your district.
So it
sounds like you're already set.
So I'm a part shareholder in our family business. Our family business does less than 10% of its products from China. So it doesn't manufacture, but it does purchase products from different places. But less than 10% is China. My brothers do own a trading company that does business in China. I don't own it. But again, that all is related to the 10% or less of our family business that is purchases from China. The rest of the purchases are United States or primarily Taiwan, frankly. So actually, people have brought up this tariff issue. And the tariffs actually marginally help our business. Because our business does so little with China compared to other hand tool companies, we actually marginally benefit from the tariffs. So my opposition to the tariffs is actually against my interest. If I wanted to benefit, I would encourage the president to continue the tariffs because it actually helps our company in the long run. But I don't believe in tariffs. They're a tax on the American people, and if getting rid of the tariffs marginally hurts our business, that's fine with me because I don't believe in it. I believe in free markets, in free trade, and we need to have more of that. That is a benefit to all Americans.
Awesome answer. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. I'm sorry. Okay. I'll go to the young woman up there. And, yep, right. Yep, yeah. Thank you.
Hi. I'm going to admit that I assumed that this was going to be more Republicans than Democrats when I came here. So I'm a little more nervous than I would have been otherwise. But I would like to say that I think a lot of the people here that are cheering you and applauding your courage, most likely a lot of them didn't vote for you. I, on the other hand, have voted for you in every election since 2010. And in fact, I worked on your first campaign in 2010. I knocked on hundreds of doors for you. I made hundreds of cold calls for you, inviting people to your events to meet you. I made tons of personal phone calls to friends to vote you in when you were running against a bunch of other people, right? That was like your hardest election versus being an incumbent, in the last time you ran. So I was there for you from the very beginning. I'm not sure how many people applauding his courage were, but I would like to say since that time, I've changed my position on you. And you have spent the last 2 years failing to do your job, which is to directly represent the popular will of your constituents. That is your job.
That's not my job. No,
sorry. I double-checked online before I wrote that in my notes. So it is your job. It's on House.gov. You can read it yourself.
My job is to uphold the Constitution.
No, that's not what House.gov says.
That is my job.
That's not what those are not mutually exclusive. Do you realize that those are not mutually exclusive?
They can be.
Okay.
That's why our system is designed
not
the way it
Not
is.
in the way that you've behaved. At first, okay, so you called for the nearly unprecedented step of impeachment. And at first you gave no reason. I read every single one of your tweets. And then when you were pressed, you finally gave a reason, and you came up with things like discussions of firings that never happened, rumors of recusal reversals that never happened, nobody reversed their recusal, and then made baseless claims about obstruction of justice, which I know you discussed it before, but you have to have corrupt intent. So you have to prove that Trump knew that he was guilty of a crime and knowingly tried to obstruct justice based on that, okay? You don't have that. You don't have proof of corrupt intent. You don't.
That's not what the
And
Muller
you
report
also
says.
further know that impeachment would tear this country apart if it went through when he was removed from office. It would cause a political upheaval in this country people in this generation have never seen before, possible civil war. You rest safe in the knowledge that that will not happen, that he won't be removed from office. So you get to make the political grandstanding that raises your national profile. You are now a national household name. That's called political capital. And you are hoping to launch your star bigger and brighter than District 3. You just talked about how you did better in District 3 than Trump. Do you want to talk about how the last election you got the least amount of support that you ever have because you haven't supported the MAGA agenda? Now that's your right to do so, but it's your right to support whatever you want, but you also know that you have no future in this district because of that as a Republican. So you want to go bigger and brighter. And I have my final thing, my question is, why did you talk nothing about the FISA abuses? If you care about the Constitution so much, why didn't you say anything about the year-long violation of the Fourth Amendment rights of Trump and his entire transition team? Every phone call, every email, every personal conversation for a year was spied upon, and recorded. And they had no knowledge. And you are laughing. You are laughing about a year-long spying on an entire team of people. Fourth Amendment's violated. And you didn't speak about it once. You didn't speak about the FISA abuses, which is currently under investigation. And you called AG Barr a liar without any proof. There was plenty of supporters on the other side. We finally got a voice on our side.
First of all, about Attorney General Barr misrepresenting things deliberately, I put out a set of tweets today which make it very clear. It's not really refutable. Go ahead and find some way to refute the tweets. Mueller himself issued a letter to Barr saying you are misleading people. So it's not even that's not even refutable. I think most of the stuff you're saying on FISA is just an excuse. It's an excuse. People come up with this excuse about FISA. First of all, the FISA only relates to one part of the investigation. The rest of the investigation is not related to that FISA. You can't obstruct justice in the whole investigation because you think one part has a problem. That's not the way our system works. Second of all, nobody has fought more against FISA abuse than me. Nobody. Nobody in Congress. And in fact, nobody in Congress. And in fact, I'll tell you what happened when last time I fought against FISA abuse in a big way. I offered some legislation. And I'll read to you what happened. So this was when FISA 702 was coming out. And it was up for reauthorization. And now FISA 702 is way worse than the FISA we're talking about. So this FISA that's being discussed right now, that actually requires probable cause and a warrant. FISA 702 allows the government to gather your information, all of your information, communications, without any warrant, without any probable cause. So FISA 702 is an extreme abuse of power, and the federal government has that power right now. And guess who signed it into law? President Trump. And you know what President Trump said when I offered my legislation to stop FISA 702? So I offered an amendment to the FISA 702 reauthorization to try to stop it. You know what President Trump's office said? This is a statement from the press secretary. He issued a veto threat against my amendment to stop FISA abuse. He issued a veto threat. This is what came from the press secretary. The administration strongly opposes the USA Rights Amendment, which is my amendment, to the FISA Amendments Reauthorization Act, which the House will consider tomorrow. This amendment would reestablish the walls between intelligence and law enforcement that our country knocked down following the attacks of 9/11 in order to increase information sharing and improve our national security. The administration urges the House to reject this amendment and preserve the useful role FISA's Section 702 authority plays in protecting Americans' lives. So this is what the administration put out to try to stop FISA reform. I was trying to prevent the abuse, and the administration tried to stop me. And others who are often in the news, you see Devin Nunes and others in the news, they were the ringleaders in the House of Representatives trying to ensure that this reauthorization passed, that my amendment was stopped, that the abuse continued. And then a week later, all of a sudden, they turn around and say, oh, FISA's bad because it was used against the president. That is just an excuse on their part. That is an excuse. They don't support FISA reform. They are not protecting their rights. They want to protect the president, but the rest of you, forget about it. The government can spy on all of you, and they don't give one crap about it. Thank you. Yeah, I'll go over here.
Thank you, Representative. I'm Alvin Chi. I'm going to hand it to Doug Booth, who has a better question than I do.
Now hold on. You got the mic. You're asking the question.
Okay. Well, I know his question. All right. My name is Doug Booth. For one, I want to say thank you for having a town hall here in your district.
All right, give your full disclosure.
My full disclosure?
Yeah, go ahead.
I am running against Justin. So,
go ahead.
But, so I'm going back to healthcare. So you talk, even your slogan is empowering people, not government. And my question is, how is it empowering to take away healthcare? You consistently have voted to repeal the ACA every time it has come up. You vote to take away protections for pre-existing or patients with pre-existing conditions. Just last week, you voted against the MORE Act, which would have increased health literacy, education. I'm just curious as to how you're actually going to help specifically patients with pre-existing conditions. I mean, it's estimated that roughly a quarter of all Americans have a pre-existing condition. So how is this empowering anyone?
Thanks. It's a good question. So first, I think the ACA and Obamacare have serious problems. They're the same thing. But for those who don't like it called Obamacare or the ACA, I'll phrase it that way. It has serious problems because what it was designed to do was to provide basically an insurance mandate. It's not health care, it's an insurance mandate. So it's designed to allow for insurance coverage for all people, and we think of that as a good thing. But what it's trying to do is take something that is not ordinarily insurable, which is a pre-existing condition, and throw it into an insurance system. And I think that's not the way to handle this. So for those with pre-existing conditions, it should be handled outside of the insurance marketplace, which means you might have a system where you provide some kind of benefits. It might be a Medicaid-style proposal, for example, to handle people with pre-existing conditions. And then you allow the marketplace to remain relatively free. Because the way Obamacare was set up, we harmed the entire marketplace. So now you have rates going up on people who don't have pre-existing conditions. So a large percentage of Americans, particularly those with young families, or older children in the household still, they have serious problems being able to afford health care. And Obamacare hasn't addressed that. It hasn't fixed it. So the way to handle it, again, is to have some kind of bifurcated system. You can cover pre-existing conditions, but it should not be handled through the normal insurance marketplace. If you handle it that way, you're just going to raise insurance rates and make things more expensive for everyone. So I don't support just tinkering with Obamacare. I think that's a mistake. Yep. Yes, sir. Yeah, I'll go to you. Yep.
Hi, Justin. I'm a big fan. Since Ron Paul endorsed you, I've been a supporter. And I disagree with you on the impeachment issue. But my question was really, do you support Bill Barr's investigation into the investigators? And if the Attorney General, Inspector General report comes out and the whole underpinnings of the Muller investigation that started it, if it does come out that there's a lot of corruption in the so-called deep state that led to his appointment in the first place, would you reconsider your position to call for impeachment?
So they'd have to show evidence that the entire investigation was started corruptly, and there's been so far no evidence of that. People have made allegations about particular aspects of the investigation where there might be problems, and I don't make a judgment about that. There might be problems in some aspects of the investigation. That doesn't allow, I know you made your point about impeachment, but that doesn't allow the president to obstruct justice. Just because he thinks part of the investigation has some problems, he can't obstruct the whole investigation then based on that part. Similarly, like if you had someone say the police break into your house without a warrant, but they were already conducting conducting a broad investigation that was already existing. As part of it, they broke into your house without a warrant. That wouldn't mean that you can obstruct the rest of the investigation.
But if it did turn out that there was.
Yeah, so I'm open to all information that comes out, and I'd have no problem with investigating the FBI or others on these points. I think that whatever information is released, though, it should be released fairly and evenly. It shouldn't be selectively released to present just one side of it or one perspective. I think the most important thing is that when the Attorney General releases information, it's released in a way that really reflects the context and reflects the entire situation, so not withholding certain things. For example, I made the point, and please read my tweets that I sent out today, on the Muller report. I think the Attorney General did deliberately try to withhold certain things
intentionally vague,
to
yes.
mislead people.
Yes, I agree with that. But I guess the deeper concern is just that you talk about losing public trust, and I sense there's a lot of loss of public trust and concern about the deep state. And it seems like you're not as concerned with it as I think a lot of other people legitimately.
Well, think about it like this. First, I brought up FISA. We talked about FISA. I was in charge of trying to stop FISA 702, while the administration and many of the people now talking about the alleged abuses were the ones who were championing FISA 702 and saying, yes, we need this. We have Section 215 coming up. This is the metadata issue. It's going to come up again this term. And let's see how the administration is on this and how other Republicans are on this issue and other Democrats. Because last time it came out, when Snowden revealed it as a problem, where the NSA was collecting all of our phone data, metadata, I was fighting both parties on this issue, Republicans and Democrats, trying to protect your rights while they were saying, no, we need the government to have this information. Well, that's coming back up for reauthorization, so let's see where everyone is on this. Have they changed their positions on it, or are they going to continue to support that kind of thing? Because you'll know where I'll be on it. I'm going to be fighting for your rights. I have actually legislation to end the program, to end the metadata bulk collection program that's out there right now, and I could get some co-sponsors on it. If people care about those kind of issues, other members of Congress should co-sponsor it. But yeah, I'm definitely open to looking at all the FISA stuff. Let me go here.
Sunrise Movement Hub of Grand Rapids. Sunrise is a youth-led climate action organization attempting to make the next presidential election about the most fundamental existential threat to humanity we have ever faced, and that is climate change. What do you have planned to address this issue, and do you see any potential for inroads made with the Democrats to combat climate change?
So it depends on what the Democrats are proposing. Like the Green New Deal, which I haven't read, is just a bunch of it's like a resolution with a bunch of ideas and concepts, but it's not really plan of sorts for how you would address climate change. What I'm trying to do is trying to work on the Republican side with some of the conservatives, particularly young conservatives who care about this issue, to try to get a grasp for ways to handle this in a more free market way. And I think that there are some proposals that would help address some of that. My main concern is that if you take drastic measures, like some of the people who promote the Green New Deal have said, where you stop production in very serious ways, you actually may inhibit the advancement of technology that helps keep the Earth clean. A big part of why we've been able to clean the environment relative to previous generations is because we've advanced in wealth and technology. And you don't want to go backwards in that, where you then have a situation where people are more concerned about making it through the day than they are about keeping the environment clean. Right now, we have the luxury of caring about the environment. But if we lived in a country where the economy was really weak, we wouldn't have that luxury anymore.
That's absolutely right, but we're not talking about polluted lakes or wetlands or anything like that here. We're talking about carbon pollution. And we're not going to achieve a clean atmosphere through technological innovation, especially with this mass consumer society that we have built. We cannot continue to industrialize the entire world and expect carbon levels, which have just gone up exponentially in the last 10 years alone, to go down with technological innovation.
Well, I think a lot of it would be handled by technology. You have, like, for example, cars are moving more in an electric direction. You have solar power is becoming more economical. So there are ways in which technological advancements are making things better and allowing us to have less carbon in the environment. So I think of course you've got to look at the regulatory side. We also have to think about the free market side and how innovation helps things. So I'll look at both. Yeah, I'll go here.
Thank you very much. I'm really glad to be here. Appreciate very much listening to you talk about the process. That sounds like a big problem to me. I didn't realize that that was such a big problem, and I definitely want to be a voice to change that. I would like any and all suggestions from you about how we go about that. I'm heavy into Twitter, as you know. Maybe we can start a little Twitter community about addressing that. I really want to do that. But my question, I've been severely disabled with chronic pain for 29 years. I don't even remember what it's like to not have pain.
Sorry about that.
Thanks. I'm not really looking for, pity. I just want you to understand where I'm coming from. So right now the opioid crisis has been a big deal. And I certainly agree we do have a problem there, but it seems like we've gone overboard, and that now pain patients like myself are really struggling because they are being looked at as if they're addicts, so we have to go through all this special rigmarole to be tested and all that sort of thing. Anything that you do when you have chronic pain is very difficult, so being asked to be jumping through more hoops is very excruciating, because just going through life is difficult. So I really want to understand from you what you believe about the opioid crisis. Is there a way to support chronic pain patients so that we're not left? And yeah, neglected and abused is exactly what the deal is. Right now the government is getting involved in the exam room, and they are making decisions that should be between the doctors and the patients.
And I share your concerns about that, and I've opposed some of the legislation that's come through with overwhelming bipartisan support to get the government more involved. If people have pushed to have the government more involved, and I've opposed that. I think that we are taking the wrong approach as a government, both at the federal and the state level, with the opioid situation. The more you get the government involved in it, I think the more harm you're going to do. There are a lot of people who are suffering, who need help, and doctors should make that decision. I don't think it should be left to some senator to decide that someone should only be able to refill their pain prescription this often or that often. Those are decisions that are better made by the medical community, not by members of Congress or our government. So I think that we should return the power to the doctors in those situations to work with the patients and make the determination. I feel for people in your situation and others, and I've had many people reach out to me about this issue who are concerned that the government is overstepping and actually harming people. And what you see time and again is government trying to promote this kind of stuff as a positive. You hear about a crisis and they say, well, we'll get involved, we know how to fix it, and actually they make the problem worse. And it's more likely that if someone can't get the proper medication from a doctor, they're going to go somewhere else. That's when they might go to the black market, try to get something that is not going to be as safe, that is not going to be monitored by someone in the medical community, and I think that is much more dangerous to people. So, yeah, and so I think that's something we need to be very concerned about. So I am concerned about that.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for having the town hall. And one of the things that I appreciated the most about your reaction to the Muller report was that, I've been really worried about the rule of law in this country and our Constitution. It seems like people are just breaking the law and not listening to the Constitution, like without any repercussions. And so guess I'm going to make a comment. Like people like Bill Barr we can all see he violated the law. He didn't comply with the subpoena. And is there any way that we can press to help get I would like to see the laws enforced against people that are violating the subpoenas. Like not just have a vote. And I know that you're Republican and this is coming from the Democrats too, but do you ever talk to Nancy Pelosi about just say, Nancy, I know I'm a Republican, but we need to arrest this guy. He broke the law, and it's setting a bad example for America.
I haven't had a conversation with the speaker about it.
Can you?
I can try, but I've tried that with Republican speaker, and that doesn't work that well either.
Well, I'm going to call her tomorrow and ask her to talk to you.
So thank you. I've tried to get her. We talked a little bit about FISA and some of the intelligence stuff. I've tried to get her to work with me on intelligence reform in the past, like trying to protect all of your data from the government. And she's always sided with the Republicans on that stuff. In fact, every time I've stood up against FISA abuse or against Section 215 abuse, metadata collection, you have a tag team of either Boehner and Pelosi or Ryan and Pelosi trying to stop it. So it's hard. I think there's some respect in which the establishments of both parties are very similar. They have constituencies that are different than like most members of Congress, frankly. Their constituencies are the lobbyists and the others who come in, and that's what they really care about. And they also think about like how to maintain power all the time, because if you're the Speaker of the House, she's thinking about the numbers all the time. How can she maintain her majority? So it's all kind of like a calculation in her mind. So I think it's very difficult to persuade someone like that of something. But I'll keep trying on that. As for whether someone is violating a subpoena, that does raise a difficult issue of maybe executive prerogative. There are some situations where the executive branch may have maybe a right to withhold something from the legislative branch if it relates to some kind of confidential internal information. There may be some executive privilege in certain circumstances. I'm not saying it is in this case necessarily, but there may be situations like that. So that always has to be balanced. Just because I, for example, agree that impeachable conduct has been committed doesn't mean that I necessarily agree with all Democrats on every procedural issue that will come up. And in fact, I'm on the oversight committee, and sometimes I voted with the Republicans and sometimes I voted with the Democrats depending on my own analysis of it. But everyone else just votes with their own party. And I think that's, like I said earlier, I think that is probably the biggest problem we face.
I just find it really disturbing. We have all these lovely picture and soft focus of Hope Hicks. Like, is she going to violate the subpoena? Like it's a fun choice. If I violated a subpoena, there'd be federal marshals coming in here to handcuff me and take me away.
Yeah, thank
so
you.
I think it needs to be, I think we need to really push for enforcement. I don't care whether it's a Democrat or Republican or independent. If they violate the laws of our country in plain sight, they should be held accountable.
And you make a good point about, I get comments about, do I care about the FISA abuse? And of course I do. I also care about abuse of power in government. And you make a good point that what ends up happening, and one of the types of abuse I care about, besides the FISA abuse, which is also important, if there is FISA abuse, we should know about it. But other types of abuse include things like obstructing justice, preventing the rule of law from taking place. So you have to counter all of that kind of abuse. It's not just one type of abuse in government. I think the executive branch is too powerful. It does abuse power under Democrats and under Republicans, and we need to rein it in.
Agreed.
Thanks. And I think that's going to, we're at 45 minutes. So I don't. It's not that I don't want to hear what you have to say. You know. All right, you're going to have to give full disclosure too then. Yeah. Give your full disclosure.
I did run for office, and I'm not anymore. We have had conversations since the very first town hall I attended. I salute you, and I like you a lot, Justin. I salute you for standing up for what you believe is right in the impeachment of Donald Trump. I appreciate that. But we've been talking about Donald Trump and you the whole time. I'd like it if we could take a moment at the end here to talk about us for a second. I canvassed all last cycle. I canvassed all last summer. I talked specifically to Republicans in our district, in the State House district where you live and I live about a mile apart. And there are 3 issues that stood out to people. I appreciate that you've been talking about nonpartisanship because the issues that affect our lives are the same no matter what side of the aisle we're on. The number 1 issue is health care. People like me who have pre-existing conditions. And I hardly get out of bed most days because the health care system has so degraded under this administration. Health care, student debt, and reasonable, fair pay and opportunity for the kids coming out of high school and college right now are dwindling. They're dwindling. You represent us. You're talking about nonpartisanship and working together and getting things done. What are you doing to address those problems that affect our lives the most? Because I haven't heard it.
Yeah, I talked earlier about health care, and in fact, I spent a lot of time on the health care issue. Now, ultimately, the party did not go the way I wanted on that. The Republican Party didn't go the way I wanted.
How do you want it to go? What will you do?
I talked a little bit about it. You'd have more of a bifurcated system where pre-existing conditions would be covered in a different way as a benefit from the government. And we'd all be honest and open about it instead of trying to put it into the insurance system where it does actually a lot of damage to the insurance system as a whole and causes rates to go up. I think that's not good for most of the people who live in this district or who live in the country. So I worked hard on that and spent a lot of time, many, many hours on that particular issue. And I know that's an issue you care about. But ultimately, I don't get the say. I don't get to decide what comes to the House floor for a vote. Speaker Ryan decides that and Speaker Pelosi. And we are at their mercy.
Will you prioritize that issue?
Yeah, it's something, in fact, it's something that we have spent a lot of time on my office. In fact, I spent hours outside of like normal working hours trying to develop a proposal.
I appreciate that.
What ended up happening is it became clear to me nobody wanted to proceed with this. So I've obviously not spent as much time with it recently because it didn't go anywhere. Nobody wanted to proceed with anything. They sort of just let it go.
Student debt, what are you doing for student debt? It's killing people.
Well, I don't think that you can resolve the student debt by having the federal government make it go away. It doesn't go away magically. Part of the problem is that students are getting loans very easily now. And when they get loans that easily, they don't necessarily make the right decisions about what to do with their college experience. And then you end up with college costs going up because what happens is as you increase the number of loans, the college administrators or the colleges or universities, they decide we're just going to increase tuition rates. So people get more loans, tuition rates go up, and all that happens is you create a mountain of debt for students, and the beneficiaries are the colleges and universities. So that is not a good system.
Okay, something can be done about it. And the last point is
fair
fair wages. Fair wages. Fair wages. People who work 40 hours a week making enough money to get by. What can you do about that?
If you're talking about like a minimum wage increase or something like that, is that what you're suggesting?
That's one option. What is your proposal for making it possible for hardworking people to get by in life?
Well, I think you have to have the market make most of those decisions. You
The
can't
market's
have
failing
if the government if the government comes in and makes those decisions, you end up with higher unemployment because what will happen, like if you increase the minimum wage enough, I'm not certain that all increases in minimum wage would cause this because there's probably like a little bit of wiggle room around where we're at. But if you increased it enough, like to a significant dollar amount, like you've seen in some cities across the country, what ends up happening is it ends up hurting the youngest people, the poorest people, the least skilled people, because businesses stop hiring them. They would rather hire someone at a higher wage who's more skilled, or they just decide we're going to operate with fewer people. So it has a negative effect if you just increase it. And I know that while many Democrats talk about increasing the minimum wage, in practice, what I've seen in Congress is Democrats voting to lower the minimum wage in places like our territories, like we have overseas territories. And in some cases where we've had very high unemployment, you've had Nancy Pelosi actually vote to stop minimum wage increases precisely for the reason that it hurts the economy. So I think people who really analyze the economics of it understand that it can't be fixed just by waving a wand and saying, we're just going to pay people more.
Thank you. I appreciate you taking my question. I hope
you.
to see you run in 2020, and I wish you the best. And I hope that you give Trump a real run for his money. And again, thank you for standing up and doing the right thing here. And I hope that you come up with a platform that will make our lives better because we need you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thanks. And we're about like 45, 50 minutes over, so all right. Who's up? All right. We'll just go a few more minutes. We'll go a few more minutes. We'll go to that. Who's the guy? I don't see the guy. Okay, that gentleman? We'll go to that gentleman.
My question is that it seems like the Republicans and the Democrats have just now figured out who they are. And President Trump has pretty much defined, President Trump has defined the Democrats and Republicans pretty good. And from what I'm seeing for the black community and minorities is that Trump is good for America. And I wonder why the Republicans and Democrats are fighting him so much when he's doing such a good job, and you're demonizing him. You're demonizing him on something that you know is not true. It's just bewildering to me that you can treat the President of the United States in this way, especially when he's doing such a good job for the minorities and black people.
So I suspect there will be a lot of people who disagree with you on that point. And nobody is demonizing him. I read a report and gave my assessment, and that's the job of a representative. The person who demonizes people every day is Donald Trump. He goes on Twitter and calls people names and says the most egregious things about people. And somehow, if anyone challenges any policy position he has or says there's something in the Muller report that we should look at, that's somehow attacking him or demonizing him. And that's totally ridiculous, of course. And everyone recognizes that. I don't think anyone thinks that is a reasonable position. He's the one demonizing people. He's the one attacking people day after day. And I don't think that's what people want in their elected officials. It's not healthy for our country. It's not healthy for our country for us to. Okay, this mic's acting weird now. It's not healthy for our country for people to have hatred toward each other, for people to be angry at each other every day. I think that the economy is doing very well, and I think the president deserves some credit for that, of course. And think about how well things are going in terms of the economy, and people are still so mad. Why is that? Why are people so angry with each other when things are going pretty well economically? And I think it's because of the tone we're setting at the top. We are not treating with each other with respect. And we need to bring that back. We need to treat each other with love and respect. And we don't have that right now. And if there's one thing I pray and hope for our country is that we'll love each other and care about each other, regardless of our backgrounds and differences. Because this kind of division is dangerous and it destroys liberty. I'm a big believer in liberty and the Constitution. I think nobody cares about liberty in Congress more than I do. And in Congress. I don't know you personally, but I'll take your word for it that you care a lot about liberty. So, in Congress, nobody cares about it more than I do. One thing you see around the world is liberty cannot survive in a system where people hate each other and where there's no virtue. You can't have a system like that. And our founders and framers talked about that. You have to have people who care about virtue, and you have to have love. If you hate each other, if you disparage each other, what happens is other systems prevail. If you care about capitalism, for example, which system is more likely to have capitalism? A system where people care about each other or a system where people hate each other? Definitely where they care about each other and love each other. When you have people who are angry, who are upset all the time, it is much more likely to create a situation where the government takes more control. So if you care about limited government, then you should be worried about people being so angry at each other. Because you can't have a system of limited government when there's that much anger and divisiveness. So I'll go right there.
So I'm pretty sure I'm the only Republican from Calhoun County that's here. One of the big questions that always comes up with a lot of the people out there is, what has Justin done? I already know that if you try to introduce a bill, it's probably going to get buried in committee. So, I mean, I already kind of understand that. But can you explain what you've done since you've been in Congress so we can kind of prove to them that you've actually done stuff? It'd be great. Thanks. And
Yeah.
you're awesome. Still love you.
Thank you. So, as I've mentioned, every member of Congress has to focus on certain areas. You're not going to do everything, of course, in Congress. So I've spent a lot of time on civil liberties issues, particularly, like I talked about, FISA reform and Section 215, which is the metadata collection. I've fought to protect your rights, and I've been the one to introduce the bills and take the debates to the House floor. Now, we've had a lot of those contests, and yes, we've come out on the bottom. We haven't won those because you have Republican and Democratic leaders who work together to try to stop us from succeeding. But on foreign policy, too, I've led the fight on a lot of these issues to make sure that we're not fighting unnecessary wars, et cetera. It's been my legislation a lot of times that is introduced, or my amendments that are introduced to prevent that. Although, again, lately, we are not getting as many amendments because the system is kind of shut down. So what I would say to people is, I think that it's a false premise to assume that because a member of Congress passed a particular piece of legislation or is getting their amendments on the floor, that that member of Congress is accomplishing a lot. In fact, the way the system works is, again, sort of like like a patronage. Like, if you suck up to leadership and do their bidding, they will give you bills. So if you think that my colleagues have introduced these bills, any of them who've introduced bills, and most, frankly, don't have that many things that get all the way to the president's desk. That happens very rarely. But even the bills that go to the House floor from Republicans or Democrats, consistently those bills are handed to the member of Congress by leadership. So if the member of Congress has like a tough district, let's suppose your member of Congress has like a 50-50 district, or they only won the last election by 2 or 3 points or something like that, those members of Congress are actually handed legislation and told, here's your bill. I've had colleagues who don't even know about the bill that they have. They don't even know about it. They're just handed it. Here's your bill. We put your name on it. It's going to be on the House floor tomorrow. And that happens all the time. Same with amendments. If you look at the amendments that go through, oh sure, people can get amendments like we're going to do another study of something or add a reporting requirement or something like that. And those amendments, leadership will help get them onto the bills because they don't do anything. And in fact, a lot of times, they will leave off like a couple things, like a study or something else, so that they can hand it to a member they want to help and let that person get that amendment onto the bill before it gets passed. So there is a lot of funny business that goes on in Congress designed actually to mislead all of you. It's designed to confuse you and mislead you and make you believe that someone is accomplishing something. When you look at the campaign ads, you'll see people who did something for children or veterans or seniors or something, and you'll find that in many cases it's just phony baloney. It's like some non-essential thing or non-consequential thing that was just added at the last second or was handed to them, and it really doesn't do that much in the scheme of things. So you have to, I think, be really careful about that. I think more important than any of that is having a member of Congress who is talking about partisanship, talking about the issues that matter, trying to inform the public about what's going on. Because I have limited power there. I'm one of 435 members. In terms of legislative power, I have relatively little power. But in terms of my ability to get a message out there, I have a lot of power. I can get a message out there that resonates with people here and across the country. And I think that's important, and that's more important than any legislative thing that I can do in Congress. So thank you for your question. Thank you. Okay, we'll go to this gentleman.
Hi, me and my wife have both supported you every time you run for election. But I think it's time to look through the smoke screen. Many of the people here clapping for you today, when it comes to principles, are they going to pull the lever for you in the election booth? I don't think so. I think they're blowing smoke. They're filling the room with smoke. Mr. Amash, you got to face reality. And going back to the gal that said our president lied, Mr. Clinton said I did not have sex with that woman. He taught my kids about oral sex. Mr. Obama said if you like your doctor, you get to keep him. Eric Holder ignored subpoenas. Okay? These are common things, Democrat or Republican. Why is it all of a sudden now coming to a head because of all the Trump haters that are in this room supporting you tonight but aren't going to be in the voting booth? Maybe pass a hat and get some money from them. You're going to need it.
So,
thanks for taking my question.
Yeah, no problem. So thank you. That is a very good question. And as I've said, I represent the entire district. So it doesn't matter to me whether a person voted for me or didn't vote for me, or donated to me or didn't donate to me. I think I've been pretty clear about that. That's not going to change my principles and who I am. So some of the people you mentioned, like Holder, I called on him to resign. I mean, you could go through a list of Democrats who I've called on to resign or have criticized multiple times, including Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton. I mean, if anyone's criticized Hillary Clinton, I encourage you to look at the criticism I've had of her. I was no fan of Hillary Clinton. So I have been critical of all those people because I do think that we get a certain type of person in politics, especially at the top levels, running for these offices, and a lot of them are not doing the right thing. And I've been critical whether they're in the Republican Party or the Democratic Party. And what I would say is, I don't think we should make our determinations about our own side based on whether the other side is hypocritical. I agree with you that many of the people, I can't speak for this room, but many of the people cheering me on will not vote for me, aren't going to support my campaign. I don't care. It doesn't matter to me though. This is what it means to be to be like a bigger person. Like, it doesn't matter to me that some people won't support me or that they're hypocritical. You have to do the right thing regardless. So I hear people all the time. My colleagues tell me all the time. In fact, you wouldn't believe how many phone conversations I had or conversations in person with colleagues. Justin, by the way, a lot of them think I'm right about the Mueller report, but they just won't say it. There are a lot of Republicans. And what they'll say to me is, Justin, you know, going out publicly with that, you know the Democrats will never support you. You know that they're hypocrites on this stuff. And I say, you know, some of them are, some of them aren't, but it doesn't matter to me. Because you have to look at what you're doing first. You have to care about what you're doing. And if you have a society where all we care about is that the other side is bad, and therefore we don't have to do the right thing, that society will break down, and you will have no liberty. For those of you who care about liberty, who care about our Constitution, I assure you, the surest way to make our Constitution a dead letter is to have a society where we all hate each other and we don't care about what the other side is doing, what they're doing right or wrong. We're just going to hate them and disagree with them. That's the surest way to destroy our Constitution. And I refuse to be a part of that. I will always stand up for liberty, stand up for our Constitution. And with that, I want to thank you all for being here and hand it back to Matt. Thank you so much.
Thank you everyone for attending. Thank you, President, for hosting us. Thank you for sticking with us well over an hour past our time. Reminder, if you want to hear about town halls and didn't get an email, we do have an e-newsletter on our website, amash.house.gov. You can sign up specifically for town hall announcements. And again, if you have a casework concern, any issue with the federal agency, give us a call, let us know, and we'll do what we can. Again, Matt Weibel, District Director.